For as long as I can remember, my life has been engaged by matters from beyond this world. Some days it is dealing with spirits of those long since passed. Other days it's tracking down creatures thought mythological by many. Though as of late, my attention has been turned to the sky, trying to establish a line of communication with beings that are not from this world. As the globe starts to engage the topic of UFOs and extraterrestrials in a much more mainstream matter, there are many who happen to already have first-hand experience. Many who have often felt ridiculed, targeted, harassed when they try to tell their story, simply for the matter of trying to understand it. In many ways, this forced people into isolation, to shut out the world that perhaps their tales were meant to help. In many ways, those skeptical of these claims try to utilize the media attention, the pursuit of seemingly fame and fortune, as a sign that one is not as genuine as they portray themselves, that those who follow the story fall into the same traps that lead to religious cults. And while in many cases, that is exactly what ends up happening, for the longest time, media attention has been the only way to try to get the public's attention onto these. The public so primed to tune out a harsh world, they seek the entertainment industry as a form of escapism, leaving it the best way to program the population, to change the minds of the masses, without them even realizing. These are exploits often taken advantage of by the corrupt, and many who try to point out its existence make it seem that it is part of some complex network, when in reality it is so much more simple than that. The majority only know a small portion of the truth, and that truth is that there has been a war, not necessarily fought with guns and bombs, a war of minds, a war of intellect, a war of manipulation. And as much as I would love to be able to showcase more details about my encounters, silence those who continue to try to draw skepticism due to a lack of evidence, even I have to admit, many are fighting this alone. They claim they have numbers, but a majority seem to only care about having some sort of group to fit into, because they have been social outcasts most of their life. More often than not, putting oneself out there as an individual poses that risk, makes you a target of jealousy, of greed, and more often than not, the masses who are threatened by genuine individualism, genuine success of others. They are incapable of handling those thoughts alone, and yet they gather the masses. Stories I've told often involve true darkness, genuine devils, beyond anything most people have nightmares of. The stories I've told have sometimes reached an extreme to where it was questioned whether or not someone would be able to make it out alive, if any. There are those who seek an almost religious-based comfort in these topics, who have felt threatened by my stories because they didn't share the light. It has always been my belief that one must acknowledge the darkness in order to truly appreciate what all the light may bring. And that is a stance I stand by to this day, no matter how weak the public reveals himself to be. But I've also come to realize in recent days that I have not done a very good job of acknowledging the light. Moments of purity, of love, that make these battles worth it. These are memories I've treasured for myself, only made vague reference to in the many public appearances I've been on. As for one, I did not have much to validate their existence. But two, the number of times that I have been targeted, been harassed, had my information manipulated to try to drive a wedge between those who helped me understand the truth, and I. That sharing the stories of what I valued most seemed redundant. There's many of you who will not understand this, who will try to justify your actions. But I've come to a point where I've realized if I'm going to truly understand what all that's happened to me, if I'm going to truly be able to help those, the increasing numbers who have had similar events transpire in their lives, I have to divulge everything. So for a change, I would like to share one of the happier memories. But in order to do it justice, to make sure I told the story right, to encapsulate the emotion as much as possible, I needed a little help. I needed help from someone who I've cared about and loved for longer than this body has been alive. I needed help from someone who I am eternally grateful for, who I have been honored and privileged to call my wife, for her to be the mother of our 3 children. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time I introduce you to Evina. I will admit that this arrangement was difficult to master, as there are a number of regulations for both sides that make such a project almost impossible. However, sometimes if there is something you truly want, you truly desire to transpire, you will do whatever it takes to make it possible. Sometimes, if you're lucky, you might just find a loophole. And with my experimentations, with my communications with others who have shared very similar encounters, you will get to hear the voice of my wife, Evina, a Tashkaru woman from the Sirius B star system, and a fellow member of the Galactic Federation of Worlds. The choice to use digital recreations of my wife's voice to utilize artificial intelligence programs in order to create her photo as well as the photos of our children came from experimentation. There are many skeptically minded individuals who, rightfully so, would take solace in the excuse, quote unquote, that there are rules, regulations, and technical obstacles behind why many contactees aren't able to simply just take a photo of the beings that they have encounters with. The regulations are in place by galactic law to avoid upsetting a populace before their time is ready for the grand reveal that they are not alone in the universe. There's many who claim that such photos would help the population, and in many ways it probably would. Sometimes it's nice to have a photo to help describe an experience, something to show off. Personally speaking, I would love nothing more than to be able to have photos of my wife and children, of moments we shared, to show how much it all matters. Even if the regulations weren't in place by galactic law, the other obstacle, technical side of it, is the interference that occurs whenever a genuine craft interacts too closely with a lot of Terran technologies, or Earth-based technologies. One has to realize that our technology is almost the equivalent of what a space person might give to their small child as a toy. It is very basic and easy to destroy. Radiation from the craft's propulsion systems easily interacts with this technology and makes it to where it's hard to function. It can cause power fluctuations, machines to malfunction, but it also can be used to capture audio interference, anomalous static, perhaps even pulsating electrical sounds that can only be made possible by some sort of interfering force. It is by placing a recorder on my bedside table every night, waiting for these interactions to occur, that I was able to capture enough voices on tape, enough recordings to where I was able to clean them up, enhance some of the audio, and use artificial intelligence in order to map out the voice. It is convenient that several within the Galactic Federation of Worlds, when they speak English, their accent can often be described as sounding similar to almost Gaelic. UK, Scotland, Ireland, sort of a mix of that region. And while artificial intelligence programs do have issues with some accent, being able to recreate them, enough was there to make it possible to render these recordings, to render this voice, close enough to where every time I hear it, it physically sends a chill down my spine. But while this method might not be the most ideal, it at least offers me an opportunity to share their stories, our story, in a much more meaningful light. I can sit here and tell you as much as I'm able to about my encounters, about my trips into space. I know there will be others who will not believe, and even if I were to provide them the evidence that they suggest would be more substantial, they will continue to elect to try to criticize every story I tell, not realizing that their bias reveal much more about who they are as a person than the people they try to criticize. I know these stories are out there. They are miraculous. They are extraordinary. And yes, I have gained some sort of notoriety by coming forward. It is never my intent to gain fame and fortune. The media production and distribution sides of my company, Bald and Bonkers Network LLC, are somewhat of a front to allow me to penetrate the various media outlets to be able to share genuine stories, to help others be able to share their genuine story, and maybe, just maybe, allow myself and others to be able to raise some sort of funding to be able to explore our stories, to do them justice, so that maybe we can help others who are lost trying to find answers to their own experiences understand that yes, these miraculous things do happen. And at the suggestion of my wife and children, I wanted to use this opportunity to share with you the story I treasure the most. A story that I can only appropriately title as a reunion of stars and souls. Back then, and even now, the knowledge of someone out there, no matter how far, potentially even light years away, no matter how far they may be, there was someone out there who was genuinely looking out for me, genuinely wanting to see me thrive, see that I was okay, being able to go about my business in the world and follow through with who I was meant to be. It has been a life-saving event on numerous occasions. Back then, when I was forced to leave Talihara, I had to leave behind most of my family. They feared repercussions of my actions. And I don't blame them. The control that the Seekar and Nebu empires had on several worlds, the propaganda, the mind control, all very similar to what we see on Earth today, confused many people. And though many of these worlds were not our original home planets, that many of our families first originated from Lyra, much like how schools today here on Earth choose to omit certain parts of history because they may be too graphic to teach. The memory of what happened at Lyra faded. Faded with jealousy, it faded with fear, faded with negligence. And many worlds continue to fall under the same influences that attacked us back then, that nearly destroyed us. And the war has never really ceased since. I mean, how can it cease when the restrictions we feel we know in time and space no longer apply? Beings could come freely from both the past and the future to contribute to the war, no matter what side they were on. And my wife is right. Even though there were resources at my disposal which would have allowed me to be able to overcome what is essentially post-traumatic stress disorder involved from me being exiled, having to escape, and having to be rescued when I was captured. Apparently, I've always been the type who has been stubborn about not taking the med. When my physical body was healed, I wanted to get back into the action. But it was highly advised I at least take some time to sit back and process everything that happened. I was very much in a mindset of a young man who would easily be manipulated by his native country, his native world. The angst, anger, the frustration, the wanting to do something about the atrocities I witnessed. All of that could easily be manipulated. And with the choices I had placed in front of me, it was best that I at least take some time to process everything that was happening, at least attempt to partake in some of the healing efforts. For many of those rescues, regardless if it was from the abductions or trying to save refugees like myself, let's just say many of us could agree that the children were a lot easier to heal. Their natural resilience and youthful age made it easier for them to be able to readjust according to our programs. As for adults, they had a tendency to trap themselves mentally, that though long they may have been away from their captors, from whatever situations they may have been, the memory of the ordeals they went through still carries with them the weight it had as if it was the first day, convincing them that they were no longer free, that it was only them holding the shackles was often the most difficult part. And I'll admit, in many ways, I fell victim to the same pattern. But upon my enlistment within the Galactic Federation, it allowed me an opportunity to get my hands working on something. It allowed me an opportunity to help others get out of their situations. By doing this, it was slowly becoming easier to break myself out of the mindset that I had deserved some sort of punishment for my contributions in the Talihara regime. From what I can remember, this incarnation as Dakota Frandsen may have not been my first time on Earth. As a soldier within Talihara, as a member of the Tal Shiar, the details are still a little hard for me to reach, maybe because it's some sort of mental block from my early mindsets, early guilt, trying to prevent me from reverting back to who I was back then. But I remember having altercations where I sided alongside Nazi Germany. Again, I don't remember a lot of the details, but in an interesting little twist of fate, it may be possible that some of the innocent people that were hurt by what the Nazis were doing, part of the operations I was involved in, may have actually caused certain branches of my own family tree as Dakota Frandsen to disappear. Trying to understand these things as an adult can be complicated enough as is. Even though there are figures out there that have been doing their best to try to help people understand these things, their information can only go so far, let alone the debates of who's actually telling the truth and who's not. But even then, having first-hand encounters is something that a lot of people, they wouldn't be able to comprehend. As an adult, maybe they've had time to process things that have happened to them, but as a child, the situation is a lot more complex. Generally speaking, children can be a lot more open and receptive to the idea. They're not exactly plagued by prejudice. Having a friend from another planet is the same as traveling, getting to meet a friend from another country. There's no difference. In my case, the complications behind it, at least for me, came when I discovered that I was a father, at the age of 12, nonetheless. Any research I've done tried to indicate that any parents that may have had visitations from their future children, a majority of them were already pregnant at the time. I say a majority. There's a few exceptions to that rule, but I don't know. Maybe there's something that I'm overlooking. Maybe the relationship as parent and child extended to even beyond that lifetime. It certainly makes sense. But nevertheless, going off of what I was able to find and what I understood at the time, if someone out there was pregnant with my child, even though I had not been intimate with a woman yet, it'd be another 2 years before I even had my first kiss. Someone had a lot of explaining. And there were times when I tried to deny the fact that that child, my firstborn daughter, who showed herself to me that day, I tried to deny that she was actually mine. Again, this was purely out of a lack of understanding. And for some reason, when these thoughts came to me, I would hear this woman's voice. The way it sounded like it was coming from someone standing next to me, as well as from inside me, but I also come to realize there was a little bit of what was kind of like radio static. Like someone was trying to quickly tune in to the right channel to talk to me. It was painful. It was painful. And this woman's voice would come through, and she'd just be like, "How dare you? That is your daughter. Do you realize everything that's going on? That is your daughter. You are her father." I felt like I recognized the voice from somewhere. But obviously, suddenly getting yelled at when I'm already confused enough as is makes it a little hard to focus. But I understand now. When I finally had a chance to say, all right, calm down. If that was my daughter, then who's her mother? The voice finally calmed down, as if it started to realize that maybe it acted a little too out of emotion. It was acting out of the heat, out of sadness. I hold no resentment because, let's face it, there's been plenty of times in this life where I've done my best to try to help someone only for them to turn their back on me, to betray me. And that stung more than most other cases. But to be fair, being a 12-year-old boy, there was one other question I had in mind. If that was my daughter I saw, my oldest daughter, who I would later come to call Olivia, if that was truly my child, who's her mother, and was she hot? I was a 12-year-old heterosexual male. What do you expect? Needless to say, the answer is yes, she's gorgeous. But I wouldn't learn that until later in life. Anytime I would try to ask my daughter about her mother, she'd always say, "Don't worry, mommy's nearby, mommy's gonna be here soon, just wait." It would always be something along those lines. Come March of 2021, when I learned about my son, I saw my daughter hanging over the shoulder of a woman lying in a kind of a futuristic bed as she was holding the baby boy. The facility, I'm not 100% on where it was. It was an infirmary of some type, and those of you who followed my story for a while know that I mentioned the view outside the facility looked like it was the surface of Mars. The male subject who was my escort, the one who took me up there, he kind of laughed and tried to correct whether this was because he knew that we were on Mars, but they called it a different name, or if it was a completely different facility and he was just making fun of me, just a playful tease. Honestly, it could go either way, but for some reason, an alarm went off before I had a chance to really process everything that was happening. And I had to get out of there. And when I was sent back, I physically remember flying through the wall of my house and hovering over my bed before it seemed like gravity all of a sudden kicked in, pulling me down so hard, I physically broke the metal bed frame and sent part of it through the wall. Realizing that I had a bit of a crash landing, and that sort of validated that I did just see something. It was a lot to process. But anytime I would focus on the woman, it was like for a brief second I could see what she looked like. But when my attention would be brought onto full focus, it was like the image of her was blocked out. One way I know how to describe it, it's like it was nothing more than a silhouette of a character you needed to unlock in a video game. It wouldn't be until a couple months later that it was time for the reunion, and it's something that to this day still blows my mind. I remember that night you finally showed yourself. I remember how nervous you were. How nervous the kids were. I think about it all the time. I remember how much both Olivia and Mikhail looked like they were trying to keep themselves from crying. I remember seeing you tremble a little bit as you approached me. Not sure how I would react. I wasn't sure how I would react either. It all felt so new, yet so familiar. But right away, I was captivated by you, amazed at how beautiful you were, and part of me already knew the truth. I remember how you said you knew that I probably had 1,000 different questions. You try your best to try to answer them all, but you said you were my wife. I couldn't question it. I couldn't. Honestly, I'd be kind of a moron if I did. I remember feeling you in my arms the first time. The softness of your lips against mine. And how it all started to come back. Who we were, everything we've been through together, who we are. I could even feel that our kids, they were excited to see everything go so well. It seemed like the only people that wanted us back together more were them. And they finally got their wish. They wanted to see mom and dad back together again. They wanted to see us happy. I remember how they tell me that anytime something would happen to me that you weren't able to step in, how much you cried, how much they cried. I remember them trying to point out all the different ways they were just trying to tell me to look up, to realize where you guys were, where we were from, what it took to get us to this point, what it still takes to keep us going. It's hard for me to share this story without breaking into tears. Even now, I'm trying to maintain enough composure so people can understand what I'm saying. But the one thing I knew, the one thing that really seemed to matter, was I finally felt that whatever it was I've been longing for all my life was finally back. The one thing I always wanted in this world was back in my life. The only thing that ever mattered, the only thing that continues to matter.
I knew from that moment you were going to want to spend as much time as possible with us and catch up on the times we lost. All three of us took every opportunity to reach out to you, to help you whenever trouble emerged, as you did your best to help us. Olivia and Mikhail had become amazing people in their own rights because they had your spirit and perseverance. I knew I made the right choice all those years ago, and even now you are still the one I fell in love with. Seeing how you progressed as Dakota was an emotional ride itself. There was so much we wanted to tell you, but even with the walls finally down, there was much we had to withhold until we knew you were ready. You were so excited, but sad to have to say goodbye. I knew it was only appropriate that put in a request for time off to visit you, an organized surprise just for us, a chance for us to create new memories together and offer you a way to help recover some still buried in your mind.
February 14th, 2022, at least on Terran time. Hard for me to forget that date. You had Michael come get me because you were planning something special for Valentine's Day. I remember you mentioning something about getting the time off request so you could come see me. That Valentine's Day was one you enjoyed last time you were on Earth. Our son had given me a nudge to try to dress up nice for you. Tried asking him what was going on, but he just kept smiling. That boy of ours. But then I walked into that room, felt the vibrations of every step I take start to dampen. Once again, I was lost. In how beautiful you looked. The shine that was coming off of your dress hugged your body so perfectly. I had never seen anyone look so elegant, at least since life. The way your eyes glimmered, the smells of your perfumes, it was intoxicating. I remember feeling your hand between my fingers. I remember the room starting to dark before it looked like we were surrounded by fireflies. It's funny how I remember it. It was almost if you had a projector going, showing the image of the stars all around us. It was beautiful. Even now, as I'm trying to recall that, trying to put it into words, I still found myself breathtaking. Then you played the song, said that you wanted something that I would be able to easily find when I got back, something that I could use to help trigger more memories whenever I wanted to dig into our past or just see you again. And I find myself wanting to listen to nothing but that song ever since. Whenever that mood strikes me, I always know that you've been close. Nothing's gonna stop us now by Starship. It was still funny, but I couldn't help myself but get caught up in the mood, to be entranced, to be intoxicated, to be completely and utterly powerless as we started to dance. I honestly couldn't tell what was more beautiful. The way you had everything surrounded, everything you had set up for that moment, or seeing that look in your eyes, knowing that I couldn't look away. And then the moment started to get the better of us, something that we had both longed to do, something that feels like most people seem to forget. Most people seem to take it for granted. As the kiss we shared got our hearts racing to where the only emotion, the only thing that felt right was to liberate ourselves, to allow ourselves a moment of ecstasy as our bodies pressed against each other, as our clothes were no longer bound to our flesh. As you and I, we synchronized, we danced, we entangled. We allowed ourselves to be so free it seemed as if we had managed to surpass the body's physical limitations. And with every breath, with every pulse, with every motion, with every touch, it felt as if it was just us. Everyone we ever were, everyone we were ever going to be, all unanimously entangled in that moment. And it was no surprise to find out later that year, towards the end of November, that moment brought new life, brought our youngest daughter, just in time for when Yan was liberated, just in time so our family could go see her parents and introduce them to our youngest daughter. The surprise you waited to show me, to show them, as we finally had a chance to just be a family again. I don't think I can ever thank you enough for that moment. And no matter where the road takes us, no matter what comes next, I hope that you know and remember. I hope that Olivia, Mikkel, Evina, they all know this. That no matter what happens in the coming days, how soon it may be that we could go home to Talihara so our kids can know their family there, that will always love and cherish you guys. But there is nothing more important to me than you. My heart will always be yours, and I will always be within reach whenever you need me. Whether I brand the name Alarian, or brand the name Dakota, or whatever comes next, my heart is solely yours. I hope that you never forget that I never give you reason to doubt that, and that I continue to become more of the husband and father you all deserve to have.
I know better than Mob can bend to sway your mind into other matters. That is simply not who you are. My parents wanted to see you and the children so much. When the space was clear, it was only right to organize a trip home. As we will do when Talihara is fully entrusted by the Galactic Federation, I know you have seen what is to come. What matters may unfold for us in the near future, but it is important you never lose hope. If the memories of our family, all that we have endured together, is what it takes for you, then make the best of every opportunity it brings. Tell the stories as you see fit, and their words and frequency will reach those who need it best. I feel your frustrations, your anger, with some that are around you and who watch you. Please know that it is only a step in the path to liberation. There are still many who are lost, many who are still blind to all that transpires, but you, Dakota, are far from that mindset. You see through it all and have done your best to make a space for all to stand equal that are willing to take on the work. Every single person hearing this is capable of so much more if they took the time to communicate with one another and work together. Cease any motion to isolate others for petty differences, unless you know the differences are for malicious intention. Even if you come across those who seek to hurt you, forgive, so you may no longer carry that resent which only weighs you down and drives away those who feel as if they are about to drown. Forgive once the battle is over, so you may reach a peaceful resolution with those once considered your enemies. It is only with that passage that Terra and the rest of creation will find the peace and prosperity all life deserves. Happy Valentine's Day. I will see you soon, my love.